I thought there were some really brilliant ideas going around. What we're going to do is go around the groups really, really quickly. And what I just want from each group is just one idea, because obviously we've got a lot we want to do today. So rather than hearing all of them, I just want to hear one thought from each group. Make sure you're listening to the other groups, though, so we don't have the same thing 7 times, which would be a pity. So let's think of the first question first. So, Louise, if you could pop around the groups. So the first question is, who could be the beneficiary? So who would benefit?
We think the first group to benefit is the students, especially in business.
Okay, so students, especially in business. Another beneficiary, please.
We feel that actually companies could benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So companies as well, very good. And
publishers as a branding strategy.
okay, that's an interesting one. So maybe publishers. We're going to explore that one in a bit more detail.
We thought that parents and government could benefit.
That was 2. Parents and government, good.
So we think the teachers in the school can benefit.
Okay, so teachers, how could they benefit? That's an interesting question.
Community.
Okay, so thinking about the wider community, how could the wider community be involved? It gets harder, doesn't it, as you get towards this end? Let's have an idea from over here.
The universities.
Okay, interesting. Is there a way that we could make universities benefit? And finally, hardest one, over here. Okay, so maybe engaging NGOs. Is there a way that NGOs could benefit from the program? Very interesting. Right, so loads of different beneficiaries. Some really interesting ones as well as some of the... there are some which are more obvious. There are some which I hadn't thought of before, which is excellent. As I said, I am going to write a new business plan when I get home. So second question, who might pay for it? And we're going to start at this end for fairness.
The businesses.
Okay, can we get businesses to pay for it?
The alumni.
Okay, could we get alumni of universities to pay for it? Oh, sorry, students, alumni. So alumni who have done the program already, could they pay for the program?
NGOs.
Okay, could other NGOs fund the program?
The parents.
The parents. Okay, so can we get the parents to pay for the programs? Or services or goods or products or whatever it is.
Educational foundation.
Good, okay, so there are foundations that exist to promote education. Could they be the funders?
Also the government.
Okay, the government. Is this something that government should be paying for? Again, harder again. See, as they get more and more nervous down this end as all their ideas disappear. I love this as well. Everyone looks away. He won't come to us if we look away. Oh, yes, I will.
Maybe pedestrians raise fund in the street.
Okay, so pedestrians. I know what you mean now. So if we're doing fundraising in the street. Finally?
Students themselves.
Okay, can we charge the students themselves? So some excellent ideas for beneficiaries, some excellent ideas for who would pay. Again, a couple that I hadn't thought about. Which is interesting. Finally, though, the most difficult one, I think, is what are we offering them? What product or service are we offering? So I'm going to start over here.
Consultant service.
A consulting service, excellent. So is that a service that I could offer to people? And over here, who haven't we heard from?
Teacher training service.
Okay, some sort of teacher training service, maybe.
Personal growth.
Okay, so it's sort of like training, personal growth training. Excellent. Mixing up. Where's he going?
Internship.
Okay, so offering a service of internships for students. And we're going over here to...
Some competitions and business projects for the students.
Okay, maybe running competitions or business challenges for students. I hope somebody's writing all of these down. Okay, over here.
Work shadowing.
Okay, work shadowing. Okay, so less than an internship, but sort of shadowing to get a better idea of work. The problem with me running around in circles is I've forgotten who I've gone to. Over here.
Parties and high-table dinners where they can meet people from business world.
Okay, so parties and sort of high-table things, they can meet people from business world. Fascinating. Who haven't we gone to?
Networking.
Okay, networking again. So really interesting mix of ideas. And what I love about this already is that you've all started to draw out different aspects of what I was trying to do. So some of you have thought about it from, Tom as a teacher. Is there something that he can share with other teachers? Some of you have started taking it from the perspective of the students. So students benefited from getting a wider idea of what businesses were, what jobs are available, and actually focusing on that side of things as well. I'm really enjoying, I don't know, I'm having a lovely time. So I think what we're going to do, are we going to bring everybody back? Let's bring everyone back. So if you want to grab chairs, and you can hear part 2 of the story. Okay, part 2. So, part 2, and Tom is now a management consultant. So I'm working for an organisation called Oliver Wyman. Hands up if you've heard of Oliver Wyman. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so one person has heard of Oliver Wyman, but I'll tell the rest of you, very prestigious. Very prestigious, did very well, yes. You'll never know. Okay, so Oliver Wyman, a management consulting firm. As I said, a bit of an odd thing for me to end up doing at this point. And if I went back, I wouldn't do it. And the reason why I ended up there was because while I was at university, as I'm sure many of you have, I took an internship. My internship was with Oliver Wyman. And I got a job offer, which is very nice. I accepted the job offer and then decided actually I didn't really want to go there straight away. So I thought, well, what I'll do first is there's this program called Teach First where you can teach for 2 years, get your teaching qualification, you can always go back to teaching later, or you can go on and continue to work in business. So I thought that's what I'll do. Had I not done that, I probably would have stayed in teaching, is the truth. But I'd already signed a contract. I'd already taken some money off them, which I couldn't afford to pay back now. So I had to go. So off I went to Oliver Wyman. I don't know what you know about management consulting, but the hours are quite long. It's really interesting work. Very intellectually demanding, very interesting stuff, lots of working on lots of different projects. I particularly specialised in retail projects. So working with some of sort of the UK's big supermarkets, so looking at how they could make more money, basically. But all the time, I was thinking back to what I'd left behind and trying to work out what I could do that would span. I almost felt like I had 2 different lives at this point. So I had my teaching life and my business life. And what could I do to try and bring the 2 together? And that was a big challenge. That's what I was thinking about. Now, I decided fairly early on that I wasn't particularly interested in the big government sort of policy level of things. And that was just a personal interest. I'd also done an internship at the UK Department for Education. And to be honest, I just realised that it wasn't for me. And some people are fantastic at policy, but it just wasn't for me. So I decided that wasn't the level that I wanted to work at. I wanted something that was far more connected to the students, really. And also something that I felt I had more expertise in. Remember at this point, I'd only had really, just over 2 years of work experience myself. So actually, the idea that I would be the one who'd be telling the government what I thought teachers should be doing just didn't feel realistic to me. It didn't feel like it would happen. So that sort of narrowed things down a little bit. So I wanted something that was all about students, and I wanted something that would bridge the education and the business worlds that I felt that I had a little bit of a place in each of them. So this was the I found this when I was putting some ideas together, and this is actually the first slide that I ever wrote about enabling enterprise. This was a school I used to teach in called Cardinal Pole School, and as you see, a very simple slide. I had some idea of what I wanted to do at this point, so something around enterprise. And by enterprise, what I mean in a UK context is all of those employability skills. In the UK, we call that sort of enterprise generally. So I wanted to do something sort of around employability skills. I thought that enterprise is neglected because actually, the way the government approached it was saying everybody should teach enterprise in all their lessons, and nobody did. So it was a waste of time. But I felt like, there should be something more than that. Over time, just to give you a sneak preview, the way it looked changed quite a lot. This was a few months later, and I changed what our mission was again. And a little bit later than that, I changed what the vision was again. So I think it's worth setting the context at the moment that there was never one business plan which I set and which I just followed through. And I think increasingly, actually, people realise that trying to set business plans with, your 5 years of what you're going to do in the future is really, really difficult, and also not very accurate. As you see, I kept changing my mind about exactly what I wanted it to be to start with. But I think one of the things that struck me from the very beginning was that I wanted to reach as many students as possible. So I'd seen other organizations running programs with students to try and get them engaged in different businesses. I think lots of businesses want or feel that they should sort of do outreach to try and get other people involved in the business who wouldn't maybe apply for it. And I'd also, done lots of research. I saw that foundations were paying some organizations huge amounts of money to work with a very small number of students. So they were picking some of the most challenging students. Again, some of the ones that I'd have had in my classroom. They were spending huge amounts of money to make sure that they had individual help, individual mentors, individual support. But I always knew that I wanted to do something that would affect a lot more students. I didn't want to feel like I put all my energy into maybe 15 students, because actually that does nothing for all the thousands of others who aren't getting their 5 GCSEs every year. It's too big a problem to have a small solution, is what I was thinking. I want to find something that actually could have a transformational impact in education, not something that would just help 15 kids. And when I say that, I'm not being, I don't want to come across as being arrogant about being better than the program that helps 15 kids, because it might well be that the exact program for those 15 kids has an incredible effect on them. But what I felt was that there was a bigger issue. So even if I couldn't have the same depth of impact, I wanted to have a far broader impact. So, where there are small interventions, often those are fantastic, but I wanted to think really big about what what could be done. So, a key thing all the way through was scalability. And I decided by this point as well that what I wanted the main thing that we offered to be a course, a program. Because I think that's what I'd been able to do most effectively in my school, was that I'd rewritten the way that we taught business to make it all about setting up a business and about a project. And I felt that that was the thing that I had some expertise in. I didn't have expertise in policy. I'd only ever done a very little bit of teacher training. I was, a few months into being a management consultant, so had limited experience of consultancy. So the product that I decided that I'd try and develop was some sort of course or program for students. That was where I'd got to. And it's worth adding at this point that I started then developing that program. So taking all the stuff, all the teaching resources I created and trying to turn it into something. Though quite how it would work, I hadn't quite decided. And just for the sake of the story, at this point as a management consultant, I was working from 8 in the morning until 8 or 9 at night. I'd have my dinner, and then I'd have enabling enterprise time, which would run from about 9 o'clock until 2 in the morning. And then I'd always make myself go to bed at 2 in the morning and get up again at 6. So it was a very hard period of about 6 months, actually. But just to illustrate, if the business plan seems funny, it's because I was working on 4 hours sleep a night. So that's the story. And I'm going to hand over to Cynthia now for the challenge.
Thanks, Tom. So this next section is about a couple of different things. One, it's about the idea of what Tom found most important. So as Tom was saying, for him, the thing that mattered most, when you're thinking about those different products and services, different ways of offering the service, for him, what mattered most was scalability. For lots of other people, that isn't what matters most. As he said, sometimes it's a big impact on a small group of people. Sometimes it's changing the whole system. Sometimes it's something that you find captivating and exciting, like setting up a school like this one that we're in today. So part of this is about what individually motivated Tom and understanding that. And part of it is about understanding what choices he was making. So when he was coming up with ideas like you were just a minute ago, what was just driving his choices and how was he coming up with ideas that he thought were effective? So for the second bit of the exercise, revisiting the canvas again. So we have Tom. We have his teaching approach as he was talking about his program that he knew was good. He had thought about many of the similar beneficiaries that you came up with today. So students, schools, teachers, parents, wider society. And he thought about possible customers. You had more than he did, schools, government, donors among them. So in thinking about scalability and thinking about building a model that would be scalable, he thought about a couple of things. One was how could he get the product to the kids? And that's the kind of, so let's think about that a little bit. In terms of distribution channels, in terms of a mechanism to deliver the product to the kids, he was thinking about kind of where are they? So if you're thinking about how do you develop a product that's really scalable, this is about thinking about where are they already and where could you get to a lot of kids? He was also thinking about how could he get a lot of kids for each sale. So for example, to some extent, kids are at home, right? After school, kids come home. So what Tom could have done is he could have had an after-school personal one-on-one tuition service. Well, that wouldn't have been many kids for each sale. He'd have had to individually persuade parents to pay for each one of those. So he was thinking about how could he get the product to the kids? How could he reach a lot of kids for each sale? And what kind of relationship would he have to have with the customers? So for example, if he was, again, let's go back to the tuition example, if he was, say, teaching the children of very rich parents after school, they might expect that he does a certain set of things for them, like he arrives early and he cooks or something, I don't know. He would do a certain set of things for them. So different kinds of customers have different expectations for the different kind of relationship you might have with them. Some expect a lot of activity and effort, others don't. So if, for example, he was selling to a school, a head teacher might want a lot of face time with him. They might consider themselves an important person. They might want to be able to pick up the phone to Tom anytime. And because there was only one of him, that would have been relatively kind of high burden for him. So those are sort of three big questions that he was juggling with. So prototyping exercise number 2, before you go back into your groups and think about different services, products and services, I want you to think about these 4 things. So you already thought about potential customers, schools, government, donors, businesses, parents, lots of the ones that you just thought about now. Think about let's say it was the government, think about how could you get the product to the kids? So where are the kids already, and how could you get the product to them? Well, I mean, if you think about the government, kids are already in school. So maybe one thing Tom could have done was gone to the government and said, government of the UK, you should make all students in the UK do this program. That could be one thing. That would certainly reach a lot of kids for one sale. But in order to achieve that, he'd probably have to spend an incredible amount of time lobbying the government and persuading them to change, or becoming friends with them and doing a bunch of other things. Or it could have been donors, and then thinking about where are the kids already. Maybe they're watching TV. So maybe he could have had a donor-sponsored TV program. And what kind of relationship would he have to have with the customers? I guess he hadn't, I mean, thinking about Tom, we were talking about this when we were prepping it, he didn't know anyone in TV, and he didn't really know any big donors. So thinking about some of the decisions he was making, partly it was just based on who he knew already. So, your turn. So before you go back into your groups, this is the exercise. Think about looking at the list of potential customers you have already. Think about how would you get the product to the kids? How could you reach a lot of kids for each sale? And what kind of relationship would you have to have with the customers? And do that for the products and services you've already brainstormed. And if you have any more ideas, do it for them too. And again, we'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll see you back here.
Is for us to feed back on a few different ideas. Now, I know lots of you have been thinking about different ideas. So for clarity, what I'd like to say very quickly is what your product or service idea is, just so that we're all on the same page with that, so we all know what we're talking about. And then what I'd like to do is to answer those 3 questions for me. So, how are you going to get the product to the customer? How do you get the product to the beneficiary who benefits from it? How do you reach a lot? So how do you get that scale, which we were talking about as being really important? And finally, what kind of relationship do you need with the customer to make that happen? So, try and keep it to about 4 or 5 sentences. So we try and keep it as crisp and as precise as possible. Anybody want to kick off? Oh, I saw a hand. Oh, good work, team.
The product. What do you have to say? The product and what the product is, and then okay, the product is a summer program. Which starts with a camp and a workshop, and then at the end of that you have a party and a high table dinner, and then you have an apprentice program where you work in a business environment and learn from actual hands-on working. And to publicize this we'll publicize this through initially a website, like Facebooks and so on, social networking, iPhone apps, and etc. And then through the school societies and the school itself, because you can start with like the schools you have good connection with, and then ultimately when you have some good track records, you can convince the government and do this through a government program, government publicizing. And customer relationship, generally good relationship, you can leverage on your connection with UBS and so on, and get them to take up good students, like potentially good business students. Is that 5 sentences?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got a new business model for enabling enterprise. Any more ideas, please? Oh, I saw a volunteer over here. Thank you very much, Group 7.
Okay. We just suddenly proposed the idea of an online learning platform. It would be compromised. I'll just keep going as I go along. We came up with an idea of maybe a website that can be promoted in some educational affairs or through different schools that teachers can tell the students to go on to, and the website will include maybe visual or audio learning, somewhat like maybe talks, maybe hands-on-hand like a teacher on the board, but I'm not sure what's the name of the website, but it can be sort of like TED, but it can be very detailed in a way, but also fun to participate in, and I think it can be expanded. You can convince certain donors to give them money, contribute, and then set up a small company. Still not quite sure, but...
That was very good, very good. Okay, so again, quite a different idea there. So thinking instead about you learning it using an online learning platform. And again, obviously that's very, very scalable, right? You can scale very quickly with a website because there's no marginal cost. So there's no extra cost in one more user, which makes it very attractive as a scalable opportunity. Thank you very much, Group 7. Who's next? Thank you very much, Group 3.
So our idea is it will be any donor, like companies, but we will have a competition. It will be a countrywide business competition, and then we'll have a bazaar or a fair. So the winning, with limited capital, do need to like have a business and see which group wins the most of the profit. And the scale will be like a large of kids joining the competition. And the problem with personal relationship is you need to have a really good relationships with the big companies, with the donors.
Again, a very different and very scalable and interesting idea. Thank you very much. Who are we going to next? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, we will have packaged training. Like we have different phases. Like we have some seminars for students, and then we have other vocational trainings in the class and outside class, like in the company. And then we will provide some career advice and also some internship for students. So in order to get the products to kids, we will have like some inter-school or inter-class competition so that they can know more about our program and also develop their business sense. And also through the competition, we can have some connection between the schools so that they can better organize other business program afterwards. And also in order to reach as many kids as possible, we have some online course so that they can just browse this website and then they can learn the business. And also they will know more about our program. And also we'll, like other groups have said, we will have some like promotion in the social networking sites and also other advertisements. Also we will unite the teachers through the teachers union or other student union. And then we will also have some mentorship program. We'll invite some beneficiary like students in the past to be the mentor, and then they can provide some advice or work with the mentee to go through a series of business program. Yeah.
Okay, really interesting there again. So not just one thing, but maybe taking together various different approaches, putting them into a package, and then using different routes to deliver that package. Louise is being extremely generous with the chocolates over there. Okay, so there you go. We get more volunteers now the chocolates are out. Thank you very much.
We can use CSR mode to provide this program to the company. That we can suggest that they can get a business plan competition that created by the youth. In this competition, because they can directly get the idea from the customer, the youth, they can get more income to direct from the customer, and they can provide their own product like the handmade shoes or their own product from the teenagers. And we plan to get more customers. We can get the union or association with the different business company, and we can get government to get the advertisement or share in their policy to get some funding or money or some taxation benefit for the company who join this program. And we can, because we working on days and days, so we can get our branding, and it will let more people to know it, and it can promote the company and your service. And in the partnership, we can provide the human resources like internship in the company and like the new product, new service the company can provide and the youth can suggest. We also can get cooperate with the image, build the social image of the bank easily because they do more in the youth, and we can sue as an agency, like we can get more chance to get new product or service from the society and the youth.
Really interesting. So a very different approach there. So looking at businesses, looking at corporate social responsibility, and thinking about how that can be used as a driver for then engaging with students. Fantastic. Okay, so yes.
Well, looking specifically at your case, we can say we can say target at the consulting sector, Oliver Wyman, or the banking sector, UBS, and the education sector, to solve the HR needs. For example, I think within like big organizations, there's always the HR needs to promote, to give management experience. You know, certain people are going to be promoted within the organization, but they need that management experience, but they're not managing any staff at the moment, and they need to be given management experience. So that I think we could target at these needs to say like a potential rising star in the management, and then like design for them a program where they, you know, say they can have a team of an internship program for that particular company, for that particular manager to manage, and then you perhaps we could do some training before we go into say UBS, and then like to teach to work with the manager to say how we give a 2-month experience, so that by the end of it is like really supervisory skill development, personal development for example a UBS employee, and it's an easy CSR experience. Well, it could be branded as a CSR thing as well, and the students who have graduated. The 5 interns who have graduated from this program next year, they could form an association, and they could promote the similar program to other banks, other consulting companies, and other education institutions, and also they could be in charge of training the next year generations people as well.
That's brilliant. I loved particularly the idea of using students who've completed the program then as a way of engaging an even wider audience. Again, another key thing behind scalability actually is how do you multiply the effect? How do you get more and more people involved? And that was a fantastic idea for how to do that. Who have we got left now? Okay.
So our product is having competitions between the students, and we target the companies as one of our customers. So we'll be providing trainings for the students who join the competition. And in order to promote it, it will be usually on the internet, and maybe do some matching, as well as posting some posters in the campus for them with all the logos of the companies participated in this project. So we believe that we need to let the companies see the value of this project. So we will let them see the statistics of those students who joined the program and have a higher productivity. And we'll allow the companies to take part in the trainings as well as have all those CSR stuff.
Actually, you can to think of cooperating with the Youth Foundation also. You can try to put some social innovation element in this course. So you, other than you making bazaars or business plans, you also put some social elements in it.
I like that very much. Okay, so using competition and also maybe integrating a bit of social enterprise. Very nice. And over here.
First of all, the companies will pay for our program, and we will provide some promotion talks of the company, and we will build the career development office in the university. The students will be attend our program, and we will cooperate with the companies to provide some mentorship or internship or placement, etc. for the students. And in order to enlarge the scale, we will promote the program by the network of companies, and we will share the model with other companies also. And we will try to cooperate with the youth organization and And also, we will try to put this program on the online platforms and the relationship with the local business. The students will be the future employees to the company, and
I think you're finished, right?
okay, that's all.
Ending on a cliffhanger. Very good. Okay, brilliant. There are so many ideas there, and I think what that really shows is there is no one right answer with social innovation. There are a dozen ways of addressing any one problem. And I think on that note, after a short break, we will come back and I will show you what the enabling enterprise model looked like, what I came up with, and that will be the third and final part of our story this morning. So I think we've got 15 minutes now for a quick break. So if we could all be back here, sat down at 11:45, so we can keep going. But thank you very much so far, and I'll see you back in a minute. So because your ideas were so good, and we spent so much time talking and thinking about them, we'd like to keep the pace up for this last part. So we're not going to move the chairs around, but what might be good actually is if everybody wants to just rotate their chairs so you can see the screen nice and easily, so I can take you through the last part of the story. So in the end, I was a management consultant for 6 months. 6 months to the day, in fact. Because at the end of the 6 months, I'd put together the business plan, and I'd got my first piece of funding, which meant that I could now work on enabling enterprise full-time, which was a really big moment for me, and was in fact the beginning of my connection with the Young Foundation, because that first piece of funding, in fact, came from them. And in fact, Cynthia, who helped choose my project as the one that they would, as the one that they'd support. So we got the funding, and I put together a business plan that looked a little bit like this. So my argument was, the argument that we put together was that actually, in the education world, there are several different levels that you can work at. So you can work at the very highest level. So you've got school governance and leadership. And it's true that, you know, good school management can turn the school around. Alternatively, you can focus on the school curriculum. So what actually is being taught in the, you know, what's being taught in the school? What subjects are being covered? But the problem is that actually the government is changing all the time what's in the curriculum, and nothing changes. Nothing happens to teaching standards, nothing happens to students' achievements, and it clearly, as I showed you earlier, hasn't had the impact that we'd want it to have on the students' employability skills and their ability to get jobs later on. Others focus on teacher recruitment. I told you about the program that I was involved with, Teach First. And actually, as I was talking to one of our facilitators over break time, there are lots of versions of that program now in other countries. So for example, in India, there's a program called Teach for India, which is all about getting top graduates who finish university into teaching who wouldn't necessarily go there otherwise. The problem with that, though, sometimes is that actually teacher turnover, so the number of teachers leaving teaching and entering teaching, is quite low relative to the total number of teachers already in classrooms. So to have a huge impact, you need to think at a sort of a different level. So what my argument was, rather than worrying about those top 3 levels, actually to think about what happens in individual lessons. So we've got the teachers we've got. They'll change a little bit, but they won't change a huge amount. But what we can do is what happens between the teacher and the student. And so we decided we focus on teaching tools. And so the package that we put together, that we promoted in our first business plan, was this. that we would put together a package for schools and teachers to use, ultimately to benefit their students. So it looked a bit like this. So a school would pay for a 1-year subscription. That's where most of the money would come from. Once they paid that money, what we'd provide is 3 things. We'd provide some teacher training. We'd give them 35 weeks of lesson plans, so all the teaching resources they needed to deliver the course. And the course was all based around students developing that business and learning about business through that. And then finally, we'd also organise 3 trips, so 1 on each term, each semester, to different top businesses so students could see the connection between what they're doing in the classroom and the real world. So that was the package that we came up with. The way it was delivered was that teachers were going to be delivering it. So we're going to deliver it in their own classrooms. We wouldn't be going in to do that. We were giving the teachers everything they needed to deliver it themselves. Over the year, the students would build up a portfolio of evidence of what they'd done. So they'd keep their business plan. They'd keep photos of when they were selling their product. They'd keep accounts of how much money came in and went out, and also notes of things that they'd learned along the way. And what we also managed to get, which was really important for us, was we managed to get the course accredited, which means that if the students complete the course, they get an extra GCSE. And that's hugely, hugely important for lots of our students because, as I said, really you need to get 5 good GCSEs in order to be able to access lots of other things. By doing this program, that was a chance to get one of those 5. And this year, in fact, 95% of students managed to pass that qualification across, I think it was about 3,000 students who entered it. So 95% of those got an extra GCSE. How was it going to make money? So as I said, the main way it was going to make money was from school subscriptions. This is not necessarily the best diagram in the world, but you see, we get the money in from the school subscriptions. That pays for 1 coordinator from a labelling enterprise to manage about 50 schools. So that's a big economy of scale there. You're 1 person, 50 schools. And then any extra money from that would go towards sort of head office costs. We would also try and get some extra money, so we'd also look for some grant funding. We'd also try and earn money from other things, but we promised ourselves from the beginning that we would make sure that school subscriptions, so the money that schools paid us, would be enough to cover the cost of us delivering the program to them. So while we might still need extra funding to grow or to develop new products, the basic product that we'd offer would be covered by the money from the schools. Okay, so that was the plan that we put forward. But as I said, nothing in social innovation goes smoothly. So I'm going to hand over to Cynthia for what actually happened.
The last kind of piece of this presentation is about thinking about maximizing our chances of success out in the real world and the difference between reality and what was, for Tom, a series of guesses. So what he's just run us through and what we've all worked through together is the idea that we started out with our key resources being Tom and his teaching approach. And what he just talked about was how he was basically, in a way, he was using teachers as his channel to get to the kids. Rather than supplying direct to the kids, he was training teachers, supplying them with materials, and letting them go on and teach with the kids, which meant that one of his employees could serve 50 schools, so very scalable, and that he wanted to get schools to pay. In talking about, when Tom was pitching to the Young Foundation for cash, we talked about this in the run-up, and he was talking about what a light touch relationship they would have with the school and how it would be very low cost. That he would provide teacher training and resources. That was the product of all of the ones that we've thought about now and that he thought about. That was the product he was going to go for. He would charge this annual subscription fee, and he would deliver training, develop the resources, and sell to teachers. But those were all guesses. So, Tom, do you want to tell us what happened?
Okay, so what actually happened? Well, okay, so it turned out that it wasn't as easy as it looked. Starting on the left-hand side, sorry, the right-hand side over here, it was really hard to get new schools on board. schools had ways of doing things. They had their curriculum set. They had their timetables. Trying to change the timetable, I found out, is really quite hard work. And we were trying to get them to put a whole new subject into the timetable, which turned out to be a big sell. Customer relationships, we thought we could have a light touch. We thought we'll do the teacher training, we'll give them the teaching resources, we'll see them occasionally for trips, but other than that, we'll leave them to it. And what we discovered actually is that in some cases, as you see under channels, the quality of the teachers was very variable. So you had some brilliant teachers who did fantastic things with the program, who did really original, different things with it as well. So we had one school where they set up a shop, and all the kids sold their products in the shop. That was a really brilliant teacher. But then at the other end, you'd have teachers who couldn't even deliver the activities that you told them to. So they weren't confident enough as teachers to get the students to work as a group, for example. And we found that actually when the teachers lack that confidence, it's really hard to make the program work, because you need a minimum level of teacher ability, I think, to make it happen. We also found that the annual fee wasn't quite enough to cover the cost of doing the program. I think particularly in the UK at the moment, there's lots of government spending cuts, and there are lots of schools worried about spending money on new things because actually they're making teachers redundant. So they're, when they're sacking teachers, it's very hard politically to then bring in a new program into the school. So even though the fees were very low, it was just that it was anything was the problem. And the final thing was there were difficulties around who would it be who could deliver the key activities. Who could be the ones who'd be out selling. So instead, we made some changes. So the CSR became a really big part of what we were doing. So we already took some students into businesses for trips, but instead we decided actually the businesses should be a really big partner in this, because ultimately they're the ones who want the students to have the employability skills. I mean, it's no good for them if they have a load of students who can't work for them. So we got them more involved. And so the businesses actually now contribute as much as the schools towards the cost of the program. A customer therefore became the businesses, and it also became a source of income. It also meant that quite a lot more of our engagement was with the business side as much as it was with the school side, which changed quite a lot of the dynamics around how our business worked. But in the end, it's all worked out all right. Where we are now, and this is slightly out of date now, because there's more logos, haven't put all the logos on there, but we now work with about 12 businesses in a major way in the UK. Most recently, we've added L'Occitane, the cosmetics retailer, which is actually quite a different type of business, which I think is really interesting. But we have various investment banks, law firms, management consultancies, not-for-profits, an airport. All sorts of different organisations are involved. And this year, we're running about 80 programmes across the UK, working with over 400 teachers. And ultimately, the most important thing, we have 11,000 students on the programmes. And this is the beginning of year 3. So we're very pleased with, although we've had to make lots of changes along the way, we've got there eventually. This is illustrating the valley of death, which is how it felt at points along the way. So there were points where, we had a plan, we had a model, and suddenly we realized we weren't going to get enough money from schools. And at that point, it feels dark and ominous, and you feel like, how on earth am I going to get through this? We don't have money. Should we just give up, go home? I could go back to being a management consultant or a teacher, and that would be fine. But actually, I think the hardest thing with social innovation is you need to keep changing, and you need to keep trying things. Because when we went around the room, the number of ideas you had already just shows there are so many ways of addressing any single problem. So if one doesn't work, change it, adapt it, try something new, as we did when we brought in the other businesses as well. And ultimately, although there have been lots of valleys of death along the way, ultimately you reach the meadow of happiness, as I'm calling it. It's actually a lake rather than a meadow. We call it a lake of happiness. And ultimately, you know, although I know as we continue to develop, there will be more valleys of death, you also get to enjoy more and more meadows of happiness or lakes of happiness along the way. I know that if we're serious about our mission, and our mission is that one day every student will leave school equipped with the skills and the experiences and the aspirations to succeed, then we need to be bigger. We need to do a lot more. We need to work harder, and we need to work more with every single student to make that happen. And I know we've got a massive, massive journey ahead of us, and I know some things are going to go wrong. But I know that ultimately, if we keep working hard and we keep working intelligently and learning and keep innovating, then I truly believe we're going to get there. And when we get there, that will be a phenomenal thing. And so I think that's probably the thought before I hand back to Cynthia I'd like to leave you with, is just how incredible it will feel when you actually achieve the social change that you're looking for. And everything else feels completely inconsequential when you get to that point.
Thanks very much, Tom. Let's hear it for Tom. So I guess, and I'm actually certain that you will have lots of questions for Tom on the basis of what you've heard already, and I want to give you time to do that. Part of this morning's activity has been because we think that Tom and Enabling Enterprise is a really exciting idea, and we'd wanted to explain it and to explain why we thought it was exciting. But most importantly, we wanted to talk about the journey that he'd been on as a way of thinking about the journeys that you could all be on as social entrepreneurs or civic entrepreneurs or whichever route that you want to take as social innovators. There isn't really a prototyping exercise number 3. But in terms of your thinking and your journeys and your business models, both today, this afternoon, when you'll get an opportunity to test out some of the skills that you've learned over today and yesterday, and also in the future, I hope that the business model canvas will be, and some of the exercises that we've done today will be a useful tool for you to use. And in doing so, I want you to hold on to 3 kind of big ideas. One is the idea of prototyping, of coming up with lots of different ideas, of sketching out, discussing with other people, getting their input. We saw how quickly and how easily, in 2 10-minute sessions, you came up with, maybe 100 ideas for different things that Tom could have done. And that's a helpful thing to go through as discipline, and because you never know which one might be the one that you really want to do. The second big idea is the idea of motivation. So for Tom, the big idea for him was about being scalable. That was what he really cared about, and that shaped a lot of his decision making. So think about for yourselves what really motivates you and what do you want to achieve with your business model. And the third is about practice. I mean, you can do all the business plans and sketches and conversations and post-it notes exercises in the world, but ultimately it's about getting out there and doing it, and that's what Tom is doing, and I know that's what many of you are doing. But part of this exercise is about thinking about your assumptions, thinking about what it is that you need to test, and going out and doing it. So it is actually your turn to take on this canvas and think about it for yourselves. So before I hand over to Louise and Tom to do a relatively quick exercise of a Q&A with all of you, I just wanted to touch on a little bit a couple of big ideas around social business models and why sometimes finding a business model in this space can be so difficult. I want you to kind of think about some of these ideas when you're asking Tom about enabling enterprise and thinking critically to think about how good actually is Tom's business model and how good do you think it is, and kind of critically engaging with it. So I guess this presentation is about what resources you really need to drive change. And money is something that we hear people talking about a lot. But obviously, it's not just about money. It's about people, expertise, networks, and time. This is a framework that we at the Young Foundation have come up with for thinking about in this case, social ventures, but actually any project. And on the right-hand side is the people out there who you deliver to, so beneficiaries who benefits and customers who pays. And on the left-hand side is the inputs that you might need to drive and develop your project, from finance and other resources, but also knowledge, networks, people, all of that. And this conversation now is just about the right-hand side of that equation. So not finance, not funding to develop your organization, but who would pay on an ongoing basis, who would pay for your business, and who would benefit. And I guess this is the question at the heart of it, is can we, in this sector, can we value change, can we value impact enough to pay for it? So I'm just going to run through 4 social business models. There are dozens and dozens, and I know many of you will know many of them, but I hope this will be a useful framework for thinking about some of the big questions. So a very traditional model of funding a social innovation is just straight donor funding. So we have a project, in the diagram on the right, we have a project, they deliver services to a user, and the customer is a donor or a grant maker, a philanthropic foundation, or maybe it's an individual, maybe it's a pedestrian who is happy to pay for the service. And in thinking about whether you want to go for this kind of model, it's worth thinking about whether there's a stable donor base. I mean, if you're going to send out people, for example, day after day onto the streets, do you think people are going to continue to give? Is it a cause that they can understand easily? So, for example, raising money to pay for difficult-to-reach young people, like Tom's, who are setting fire to textbooks, is a different order of challenge to raising money to pay for a Global Innovation Academy, which doesn't immediately seem, for many people, like a big social impact area and doesn't kind of tug the heartstrings. So that's something to think about. American Red Cross is one example of a big social innovation or social organization that is funded almost entirely from a really, really stable donor base, just grants. And that is something that is, you know, and so it definitely can work, but it won't work for everyone. Another example, particularly in the UK and other countries, is public sector commissioning. So same idea on the right, you deliver a service to a user and you get the customer, in this case the public sector, to pay. And if you're thinking about this kind of idea, some things to think about are, could the government pay? I mean, do they have the power to do that? Do they have the power to commission and make decisions on that kind of basis? At which level? Is it at the national level or the local level? Can schools in the UK can commission their own services, but in many countries they can't. What outcomes are they looking for? What are their eligibility criteria? And although government can be a very stable customer that will pay on time and is reliable, they can also often ask for burdensome requirements like long contracts and other things because they're such a big organization, they don't know what it's like to be a small person on the outside. So that's also something to think about if you're going for a public sector commissioning model. We talked about the example of Teach First and their business model yesterday, so I won't revisit that. A third model is user charging. So actually charging the people. We heard before somebody said, why don't you ask the students to pay? Actually charging the people that you're aiming to benefit. And some people, I have a kind of moral objection to that, and they think if you're doing public work, if you're doing socially motivated work, you can't ask people to pay. I mean, they're disadvantaged people, so how could that work? But in many developing countries particularly, there's this idea of very affordable, very cheap services that make a big impact on people's lives. And actually, if you can deliver them for kind of a very affordable fee, maybe it's okay to charge users. Or maybe it's okay to charge richer users more money and then charge poorer users less or nothing at all. So that's kind of one idea to think about. We also talked about Aravind Eye Care yesterday that has that differential pricing model where they charge rich customers more and poor customers less. And it is a service that has reached many, many poor Indians, millions in India. And the final model I wanted to talk about is the social jobs model. So the project over on the right-hand side is there. And that's where they might deliver a product or a service to paying customers who pay. And how they help the people that they are aiming to help is that they employ them. So an example could be there's 15 Foundation in the UK. Jamie Oliver, again, employs young offenders, people who've been in the criminal justice system, in the kitchens. They cook in a kind of a fancy restaurant. They get kind of wealthy people to go and eat there. They pay a little bit of a premium because they know that it's good food and also that there are kids who need it who are getting a job in the back. And so that's something to think about as an interesting idea. It only works in certain kinds of cases, though. It's worth thinking about what kind of, if you were to get the people that if you were to get your beneficiaries to work for you, what could you actually produce? And could you run a business? It's hard enough to run a restaurant, for example, if you don't employ young offenders. Could you run a business and fulfill a social objective? That's something kind of to think about. So those are some big big ideas and some business models in the social sector. And I think at the heart of it is this idea that there's this triangular relationship in the social sector between thinking about who the beneficiaries are and thinking about who might pay to serve them in some way. So before we break for lunch, I just want to get Tom and Louise to come up here and for you all to bring around your chairs, and we'll have a bit of Q&A with them.
Okay, so in the spirit of yesterday, we hope you found that session useful. But as we were saying yesterday, it's really important, and I know you have lots of ideas, it's really important for us to remain critical, keep our eyes open to opportunities that are out there. Going back to what Cynthia was saying about prototyping, those hundreds of ideas that you just came up with. And you never know what opportunity is going to come for you to be able to refine and change the way you're working or definitely refine it. And as new opportunities arise all the time, you just need to keep your eyes open. So this may be a new opportunity for Tom to rethink his business model as well, or maybe not. But this now is the opportunity for you to ask Tom some questions about why he made the choices that he made in a bit more detail, and maybe you have other ideas. So sticking to the ground rules and sticking to being respectful of other people, I challenge you all to challenge Tom about some of the decisions he made. And as much as you're critical, I'd love you to ask questions kind of what if you did something differently and why didn't you do that? So Tom, be prepared.
Very prepared.
And Team MaD, go. Who'd like to ask the first question? I'll give you this and you can pass it around the audience.
Well, I have experience working with band 3 schools in Hong Kong. So from my experience working, band 3, we only have 3 bands in Hong Kong, so band 3 is pretty much the worst. And from my experience working with them is that the students usually end up working in convenience stores or like McDonald's and all those. And so my question is with regard to choosing of business partners, I see that you choose UBS and SocGen and all those. It's I cannot really imagine students from Hong Kong would be able to be employed with them in the future. So would you be thinking of working with more practical business partners that they really would get employment in the future? That's my first question. And my second one is, what is the success indicator for you? Because you've been talking about you've got students enrolling into your program, but then I guess the success indicator would be with regard to the enterprise skills. Yeah, so those are my 2 questions.
Thank you. You can keep that. And I'm going to ask Tom if you keep your answers fairly brief, and if everyone could keep their questions quite brief as well, just so we can have a lot. No, that's okay.
Right, 2 brilliant questions. So the first one was, how do we choose our business partners, and is it, are they really appropriate choices? Given what the students might be capable of. Okay, so to address that, I think, in honesty, to begin with, we sort of took whatever business was interested. And so there wasn't an awful lot of strategy about who we picked. It was the businesses who already were interested in working with students of all different backgrounds. And I think at the moment, if you remember the list of businesses, there's quite a lot of sort of professional services firms. So, the consultancies, the law firms, things like that. And that's just because they have more active CSR programs, if I'm honest. So we are at the moment trying to rebalance a little bit to get that broader set of businesses. So for example, L'Occitane, a very, very successful business, particularly in retail, which might be an area which some of our students are particularly good at, because some of them can really charm you when they try to. They'd be fantastic salespeople. So one of the programs we're doing is they work partly in the shop and then partly in head office as well, so they can sort of see different progression routes. But I think the other point is we want it to be aspirational. But also, there are so many different roles you can play within an organisation like UBS or any professional services firm. You don't have to be the top consultant or the top lawyer. You might equally be making a brilliant contribution in the administrative side, or it might be the catering side, or whatever it is. So when we take the students to business, we try and show them that there's a whole range of different careers that they can do there. But whatever the career, you still need those core employability skills. And to the second question about impact, impact is so important, and it's something I didn't really get a chance to talk about very much. But there's no point in just doing things because they sound like they should be good things to do. Only do them if they actually have the effect you're looking for. So there are a couple of key ways that we measure our impact. The first is, as I said, that the programs are now accredited, so students get that extra GCSE. So we watch the pass rate across all the different schools very carefully. And if it looks like it's dipping or going down in one school, we find out why and we intervene to make sure that those students get a better quality of the course. And the other thing we do is we get, obviously we're trying to measure the effect on employability skills, which is much harder to measure than knowledge. Knowledge is really easy to examine. Skills much harder to assess. And the way we do it at the moment is we get the students and the teachers to self-assess at 3 points over the year. So before they start the course, during the course, and at the end of the course. And they respond to a big questionnaire, lots of different statements, but essentially saying how much they agree or disagree with statements. So things like, I enjoy working as part of the team. I feel comfortable leading others. I'm happy to stand up and present in front of others. And we see what the change is over the year. And if you're interested, actually, I'll show you the impact report we've got afterwards if anyone wants to see it. I should add, actually, I'll put out some more brochures about enabling enterprise too, so you can have a look over lunch if you're interested. Two very good questions.
Thanks, Tom. Who's next? There's one there at the back. Thank you.
What's the exact partnership with the airport, with your company?
Great question. I was going to ask that.
So the airport is just one of the businesses we work with. So with the businesses, the partnerships vary. So sometimes, and normally where it starts off, we just take the students there for the trips. So as I said, every term the students get to go out to a business and take part in some business games and activities, meet people who work there, get a better understanding of sort of career options. So Manchester Airport, we took the students there, and they actually have a disused control tower, so an old control tower they don't use anymore. So the business challenge for the day was to come up with an alternative use for it. So they had a look around, they interviewed some people, and they had to come up with ideas for what you could do with it. I think the winning group in the end put a museum in it and used it as sort of something interesting but short that people could do while they were waiting for their planes. And it hasn't been put into use yet, but we're hopeful. And then some of the businesses as well are sort of financial contributors. So generally after we've worked with them for a year or so, we start talking to them about whether they'd like to support the programme financially. And no one said no yet.
Excellent. Does anyone really disagree with Tom's business model, or really just not understand why he made those choices that he made?
Don't be shy.
You all think it's a great business model? Tom, do you think it's a great business model? What can you see? What can you see changes? Where are the biggest risks for you?
That's a good question. So I think I don't think it's a bad business model. I think what I'm proud about with it is that we have achieved that goal of covering our costs of delivery from school subscriptions, and I think that's really important. But we are not at the moment generating the amount of surplus that we need to reinvest in growth, is the truth. And we need to be generating more money. Because if we're serious about getting every kid in the UK to do the programme, that's an awful lot more kids than we've got at the moment. You know, we're working with about 80 schools. To put that in context, obviously 11,000 kids is a lot, but there are 26,000 schools in the UK. So the scale is huge. And to reach scale, we need to be able to invest in keeping growing and in getting more schools involved, and the model doesn't do that yet. So we're still reliant on grants and donations to make up that gap. I think going forward, what we'll be doing more of is more consultancy work, because as we get better at what we do, and we believe that employability skills can be taught all the way through the curriculum, we want to do more work with schools to help them change the way that they're teaching subjects they're already teaching, to teach it in a way that also covers those skills. So I think that's probably going to be the next step for us. So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. I would just like to ask the business that you said they take part more actively at the end when you change your business model and they become the source of income. Do you mean it's like a CSR project, so they donate it to your organization, or some other kind of income source? And the other thing is slight suggestions is that rather than, for example, I think your students' products are really diverse, from trainers, customized trainers to smoothies, etc. So haven't you thought of matching up similar industries? For example, you get Nike, working with them and see whether they can inspire them, either way. And yeah, perhaps this can work with more relative, relational kind of industry, so they can learn about the industry knowledge of what they really like. For example, all of them like sports or drawing, so they can match up with different enterprises. I know it will be quite difficult because of the scale, but yeah.
Two very interesting points again. So the first one was a quick one on why companies fund us. So mostly it is through CSR. So it's their corporate social responsibility goals. Lots of them have a focus on youth and education, and they want to have a more diverse workforce as well. So it's very much aligned with that. A couple of them now are actually, again, involved more openly because it's a good marketing and recruitment tool for them. So some are asking to be seen as sponsors of the program, because they think in a very competitive job market for really top graduates, actually saying that there's a chance to be involved with helping with a program like Enabling Enterprise as a volunteer is a really attractive selling point. So yeah, there are two reasons really why they're getting involved. And as to your other point about better linking industries and the students' products, I think that would be fantastic. I think at the moment we're still, I think there's a lot of work we need to do on pushing forward and getting a wider range of businesses involved. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can offer the students a more diverse experience in terms of different career routes. The other thing I should add is that so at the point we wrote the business plan, we basically had one program. We now have programs that work with students from the age of about 8 through to the age of 19. So lots of students now will follow a course not just for 1 year, but over several years. And over that time period, then we can do far more with them. And our most recent program is all based around social enterprise, social innovation, and trying to get students to think more creatively about the problems in their own community or school and how they can address those.
Tom, are you happy for people to be seen as sponsors of the program because it makes them look better? I mean, where do you sit in that? Where would you say no?
Yeah. It's difficult. So some people really think that businesses shouldn't be involved in education. I completely disagree, obviously. So we have to be careful about the businesses we choose. I think some businesses are more provocative than others. So for example, we wouldn't be linked with a company like BAE Systems, which is British Aerospace, because it produces quite a lot of weapons. And so that wouldn't be an association we'd want. We also we looked a while ago at doing some work with BP, and then obviously the disaster happened in the Gulf of Mexico, and we decided we'd leave that for a little while. So, you know, we do have to be careful. But at the same time, you know, I think business is what makes the world go round in many ways. So you have to really, you know, you have to embrace the fact that business is a key part of economic success.
Thanks. There was a question here.
Hello, Tom. I really think about how to use this teacher training course in China. But the most difficult way is how do you persuade the principal or how do you persuade the school to accept this idea?
So Tom's persuasion skills we'd like to know about.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to persuade a principal. And I think what we've discovered this year as well, actually, is that it's really hard to... I think I have a natural advantage because I set it up. So what's really difficult, actually, is going from it being me talking to all the principals to now I have a team of a couple of other people who are also going out talking to principals. And they found it much harder, I think, than I do because it's not their creation, so it's harder for them to sell it to people. I think the other thing we've learned as well is that, so we have, confidentially, we have one team member who used to be a teacher and one who didn't. The one who used to be a teacher has found it much, much easier than the one who didn't. Because I think if you used to be a teacher, you've got a lot more credibility with the principal than if you didn't. And so I think that's definitely something to bear in mind is how can you project, how can you give a sense of credibility when you're talking to people about your innovation?
Okay, we have time for one more question. Sorry, it's just that one there, unless you want to do it together.
Oh, together. Okay, hello Tom. I'm interested in how you build up the relationship with the school and your teacher, how they build up the relationship with the students. For example, I'm wondering, you have changed the school relationship from partner to a business sectors, and then, for example, some of the students they may think that you're already give up myself, and then I'm a poor academic results, and then how can they trust the teachers to build up their relationships? So I wonder how you solve these kind of questions.
Yeah, that's again a really brilliant question. So how do you resolve it when you're working with students who've sort of lost trust, I guess, is what you're saying, lost trust in teachers because they've been let down over such a long period? This is one of the limitations of the model. Ultimately, teaching is all about building relationships with your students. And while we can develop a program that makes that easier to do, ultimately, as I said earlier, if you've got teachers who really aren't good teachers, and don't have that natural empathy with their students, it's really difficult. It's what's interesting. So this is probably a longer answer than you want. What's interesting is we started off with Enabling Enterprise being all about the students and using teachers just as a means of delivery. But actually, what we're finding more and more is that the feedback from the teachers and from the principals is that the program is great because it helps the teachers become better teachers, not only when they're teaching the Enabling Enterprise course, but in the rest of their teaching too. And the reason for that is because basically they're getting the chance to practice time and time again how to be a good teacher because the resources help them do it. So they deliver the resources, but they're also thinking about, oh, actually, could I use this in another part of my teaching? You know, this is a good activity, maybe I can use it again here. And so what you're seeing actually is that now not only are the students and the companies benefiting, but actually you're seeing the teachers benefit more and more as well because they're learning just from the experience of being taken through how to deliver a good lesson. And they're doing it time and time again, learning more, taking more away from it. And that's interesting because that's a social impact we didn't even think we'd have at the beginning. So it's interesting how it goes in different directions. Thank you for that question.
So we're gonna wrap up now. Tom, I know I'm speaking for the whole group when I say I'm completely inspired by what you do, and so impressed and just so pleased that we've got someone like Tom doing the work he's doing in the UK. I have two final rapid-fire questions for you. If I gave you £800,000 tomorrow, what would you? No, 500,000. What would you do with it? And what would you do with it for Enabling Enterprise? Not what would you buy for yourself? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is going back to your ambition and your prediction of where things are. Where are you going to be in 5 years' time?
Okay, so £500,000. Though why you knocked it down, I don't know. So what's that? That's about 6 million Hong Kong dollars.
6 million Hong Kong dollars.
Okay, so 6 million Hong Kong dollars. I would get us an office to start with, because at the moment, wait, I'll tell you about my office some other time. We basically go around a big office and try and sit wherever there's an empty desk. So it'd be nice to have a real office. But more than that, I think it would be about investing in growth at the moment. You know, to build up a team of people who know enabling enterprise and the courses inside and out. They'd all be ex-teachers, because that's what they need to be. And they would spend a lot of time working with teachers in other schools, trying to get more schools interested, more schools involved. Because, as I said, if we're serious about every student leaving school equipped to get a job, to have a full and successful life, we need to grow so quickly, and we need to grow. We need to work so hard at that.
So you wouldn't change your mission; you just get much better at what you do.
We get much better at it, and we keep experimenting with different things as well. And in 5 years' time, I'd want us to be working in every area of the United Kingdom. Maybe with a franchise in Hong Kong. If anyone wants to take me up on that. And I think I'd want us to be recognised. I want people to know what we were doing, to know that if they were interested and serious in getting involved with the issue of employability skills, that we were the people who were most effective to get involved with. So whether that's schools, whether that's teachers, whether that's parents, whether that's businesses, if they're interested in employability skills, then enabling enterprise are the people to talk to.
So thank you to Tom and Cynthia for taking us through this morning, and give them a big round of applause.
Thank you very much.